Welcome to our Fill Up Your Cup. Today, we're focused more on dimensions of sustainability with a little bit of a dive into financial sustainability. It's a big, huge topic, and so we can't talk about every single thing in 30 minutes. So we're just going to start with the financing piece. So Sue, over to you for an intro on Phil.
Great. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited that you're with us today. So next slide. So my name is Sue Grinnell, and I'm the director of the Population Health Innovation Lab, and this is our mission. So we are an innovation lab, and we design, catalyze, and accelerate innovative approaches that advance health, well-being, and equity. Next slide. So again, as Christina said, this is a bit of an experiment. Like, we focus a lot on health-focused multi-sector collaboratives and are in a lot of conversations where we're, across the board hearing people who say they want to be in dialogue with each other and they don't really always have the opportunity to do that. So we're trying this out and seeing, and really the intention is to bring people together who are doing this really hard work of supporting multi-sector collaboratives and really, look at various topics, have dialogues, learn some things, learn from each other. So today, we thought it would be good, based on what we're hearing and from the registration, to just talk about dimensions of sustainability. And I know Christina is going to share a little bit, but I think even that word, we all might have a different definition of what that is. So just kind of, raising our awareness around that. So we have this notion of the concept of the day. So that is our concept, and our resource of the day. So we're going to share a resource that hopefully some of you have not seen, or maybe you have and you've used it. And it's something from the Ripple Foundation, or Rethink Health. And then we just want to open it up for group discussion, and we're going to do a small poll and close. I think, Christina, I'm turning it back to you.
Wonderful. So we're just going to start with a brief kind of overview. And next slide, please. On why are we talking about sustainability and multi-sector collaboratives? It's one of these things where, first of all, the concept of sustainability, as Sue has mentioned, is huge. There is so much that goes into the idea of sustainability. And so it means different things to different folks. There are social components to sustainability, like the trust, for example, when you're talking about a multi-sector collaborative, the relationships that you're building that go into understanding what sustainability might look like. You might have economic sustainability, whether or not you have efficiency or the opportunity to grow, the finances, the things that you need to support the work or things that are happening in your initiative. There in sustainability, often you hear the environment come up, which is a whole other set of things that we're not necessarily going to touch on today. Again, we're going to really focus on a couple pieces. But environmental sustainability, are you all doing and stewarding the work that you have in a way that's environmentally aware, that's supporting sustainability? Additionally, when you think about environment, there's a lot of implication in terms of equity for the work of a multi-sector collaborative. And then we have lots of other views on sustainability, like ecological and other things. And so I just want to start us off with that reminder that sustainability is not financial only. It is a huge thing. And so there's lots of different components that we won't be covering. But what we really want to emphasize for today is that it's really important to build an understanding within your multi-sector collaborative of sustainability of what you're trying to do. And some of the primary questions that you can start with is like, what do you even want to sustain? Mm-hmm. Is it your collaborative? Is it perhaps the impact of the work that you're doing outside of the collaborative existing in and of itself? Is there something else that you're trying to sustain? And so as you all are working together and creating this multi-sector impact, we want to encourage you to be in dialogue with your partners about what you're trying to sustain. Have these conversations, because again, this isn't the same for every single person. And so bringing this topic up and making sure that you all develop a shared sense of understanding around this sustainability is really important. And then as a result of that, hopefully you get into a plan. So how are you going to support the financial components of sustainability? How are you going to support the social components of sustainability? Because there is a lot to think about in terms of making sure you're addressing holistically what it means to be a sustainable group. So Sue, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a
Okay.
little bit more about the MSC side of things.
Okay, great. Next slide. So just to tag on briefly to what Christina said is, there's many types of sustainability. What's funny is I don't know if any of you have used the PowerPoint designer function, and if you put in the term sustainability, what comes up is everything green, trees, flowers. So it's interesting, just even that, right? Like, in terms of what it's oriented to show up. So collaborative sustainability, right? These are things like, do you have a shared vision? Do you have a shared purpose, right? Do you have clearly identified partner roles? And do you have clear and active partner involvement? And is there a sense of trust? Because I think when people trust each other, they tend to be in it and to stay together. Financial sustainability really is just what I think a lot of people might focus in on. And it's just your ability to focus in and secure and manage the resources that you have to achieve those long-term goals and objectives. So these are just a couple of examples. And then I want to dive in a little bit deeper. If you could go to the next slide. So today, kind of the concept, just diving deeper, is financial sustainability, and really just giving some examples. I think there's many ways that we can actually do this. But there's blending and there's braiding, right? And I don't know if any of you have had experiences doing this. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't, and maybe you have and didn't know that that's what it was called. But really, this blending is just mixing funds from multiple sources to support a common goal, right? And so these might be things like an affinity group. We had something at PHI where there was 18 foundations, right, that came together to fund 540 CBOs around COVID. So they were kind of donating to the cause. There's also things like membership models, donations, sponsorships. Sometimes foundations will give operating grants, right, to really support what it is that you're trying to do it. The piece about this is that there isn't a necessity to track the funding source, right? So braiding is where funding is kind of pulled together from multiple sources, but it's really important, right, that the partner who's giving the money that has the ability to maintain and track that. One example that I've experienced when I worked for a state agency, the Department of Health, I managed 14 different chronic disease funded programs that came from the CDC. And we took a number of those to, we braided them together and funded them out, but the onus was on us to track how each one of those dollars was being spent as it went out the door. So it's a lot of work, in doing that. I've also seen combinations of things where you might have some braided and some blending. So I'm going to stop there. I know that's maybe a lot for some, and then I think I'm going to turn it over to Christina.
Yes, I want to pause real quick and just see if anybody has any specific questions about these two concepts of blending and braiding before we move on to sharing a little bit more about a resource. So Sue, in the chat, I did ask folks about what they were curious about related to financial sustainability. And somebody was mentioning, how can we build capacity during the blending and braiding of funds, particularly when it comes to the reporting and funding?
Uh-huh. Is it Danielle?
Uh,
Yeah, Danielle.
Yeah. Hi, thank you so much for the question. Can you just say a little bit more? I want to make sure I'm understanding the question.
I apologize. I came in a few minutes late,
That's
but
okay. You're
um,
here.
it's just as we identify different funding streams to support our initiatives that are very community or facing and based. Now we're facing additional reporting requirements from various funders and trying to figure out ways to weave the needs that the funders are asking of us, along with what are the realities of grassroots and community oriented work. Um, so I guess it's, either building capacity for the smaller organizations, or how can we approach reporting and navigating requirements in a way that we aren't creating even more burden.
Yeah, on them. Um, Gosh, I'd love to I mean, I have some thoughts. I mean, I don't know if folks have experience with doing that at all. Anybody have anything to offer at all? But so first of all, I just want to name, like, that's a challenge. What's coming?
Oh,
Sorry,
so
I touched my, on accident, I touched my space bar. Is We had a pot of money in California that I manage. It's the California Accountable Communities of Health Initiative. So it was an ACH. I received money from like 4 or 5 different sources. And I worked with the funders collectively to make sure we were all on the same page with it, is what we would is that we were trying to do. I ended up, I mean, the work really fell on me, right, as the program person, to identify um, common things that each one of them was going to have to do. And then the outcome of that really is that I put it into everybody's funding scope of work, asking them to do that so that it met what it is that the funders were looking for. I don't know if that's helpful or if that makes sense, and certainly willing to talk more. I also would encourage you, if it's at all possible, to invite in some of the people that you're funding with the funders, like we've done that as well, so that they can have the opportunity to be in dialogue with each other. I do believe a lot of funders, maybe not yours, or, really want to be in partnership. They want to see impact in the work that they're funding.
Thank you. The idea of inviting them in for those conversations is such a good one. I hadn't thought of that. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
yeah, thanks so much, Sue, for that note. I think it's really important. We were having a side conversation just about this topic and just relationship building with funders. Like, it can be so hard and it can be very weird and challenging, but the fact that you can have a relationship in and of itself is a novel concept, I think, to a lot of folks. And so inviting people in for those conversations that are really important and challenging both informs them where organizations are, but also allows you to get a better sense of what else they might be able to support or provide. And so, Sue, thank you just for raising that idea of being in conversation. I am going to go ahead and pivot now so we can share one of our resources today as we're talking about financial sustainability. If you have other questions, please feel free to post those in the chat. I just want to circle back and remind everybody that Fill Up Your Cup is really about this connection of colleagues. Like, we at Phil do not consider ourselves the experts and the end all be all on all the knowledge of everything multi-sector collaborative. The power of these sessions is really bringing you all together from across the states, from across the world. We have registrants that are outside of the United States. And so we are hoping that you will take this as an opportunity to share with your colleagues the resources and things that are valuable to you, to be in dialogue, to speak up when you feel comfortable, or just put things in the chat. Or if you want to share anonymously, feel free to ping Sue or I, and we are happy to share remarks without naming you or anything like that. But just a reminder that there's power in the collective space of this room and the people gathered. So I'm going to go ahead and move on while you all are sitting with any other questions you'd like to include here in the chat. Next slide, please. One of the resources that we wanted to share today in relation to the concept of financial sustainability is a financing workbook. Who knew there's an amazing financing workbook out there? This was actually put out by Rethink Health, which is one of kind of the flagship initiatives of the Ripple Foundation. If you have not had a chance to check out this workbook, you absolutely need to go there and look at this. So we have the QR code. There's also the link there listed on the page. But what I would suggest is that you take just a moment as you're working to build this idea of financial sustainability and just go here and say, like, how do I get started? What do I do? There's often a lot of ways to think about financial sustainability that people have not brought forward. We do a lot of things around grants in the world of public health. Yes, let me put that link here in the chat. We do a lot of things that are grant-based, and we know that that's not sustainable. What I would encourage you to do, especially one of the things that I really love about this financing workbook, is that in Module 3, if you click on Module 3, there's a link in there called Resource, a typology of potential funding structures for population health. If you click that, it has a beautiful matrix of all sorts of different funding sources that you can consider as you're building out a financial sustainability plan for your organization and your work and your multi-sector collaboration. So this is a place where I would encourage you to jump into to explore. What I also love about this is that if you're not really sure where to get started, if you scroll down on this webpage, you can go to the Where to Start section. And they have a few questions here, like, are you trying to find money for your work? Are you trying to figure out how to best invest the money that you've already got? And you can answer a series of questions, and it will point you to different sections in the modules of where it might be most helpful. So this is just one nugget out there in the world of things that we feel is really helpful and can be a valuable resource to you all as you do your work as a multi-sector collaborative moving forward. So again, the goal of these sessions is to be in dialogue with one another, to share resources, share concepts and tools that we have found are of value to multi-sector work. So this is our little nugget for you today on the resource. We are going to go ahead and just go to the next slide where we invite you all in to share a little bit more about financial sustainability. Are there other tools that you all know about out there that you think are really helpful or that you have found particularly inspiring or worth sharing with colleagues? So just think about that for a few moments. And we're going to see if anything else comes up. If you have something that you'd be willing to share or link out to folks, please place that in the chat separately. Oh, John, if you would like to speak, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, hi. So I work at a nonprofit organization, and traditionally funded by everything by grants, you know, for community outreach efforts like tobacco education and sexual health and things like that. We're currently rolling out a bunch of new CalAIM benefits, which are a different model, right? So these are now kind of like fee for service or PM type of rates, and we're just looking at what Sue had touched on with the idea of blending resources. So really at some of the community health worker programs, what we're looking at is trying to blend these programs together. So like, let's say we have a grant funded tobacco outreach type of thing going on. In what ways can we use community health workers and the community health worker service benefits specifically to use these events that we're already at to funnel ways to have a billable event or intervention or training or class or something like that for people at those meetings already, right? And to us, that would be like a value add. We're already there. We already have those staff. It's already grant funded. Now, if we can add on services that are of value to the community and the members that are there, you know, how can we do that? But then it starts bringing in just all sorts of questions, right? Because we're just kind of coming up with this as it is, and it just brings up questions, you know, about blending or braiding those funds like that Sue had mentioned. And that was really just what I wanted to share, how this is resonating with what we do.
Oh, John, I love that example. We are deep in the world of CalAIM through multiple initiatives at Phil. And so it's exciting to hear that you all are leveraging that. I know it's one of the things that we are really hopeful that nonprofit organizations will be able to get further into the space of billable, reimbursable services. And I love that you're pulling out just the creativity, talking about how this is an opportunity to blend and to braid. I think that's an amazing example. For those that are not based in California, this is an exciting opportunity through Medicaid to have reimbursement for things like CHW-based services. And so we're excited to see how the landscape is transforming to support more holistic, whole person type of care and inclusion of our community-based organizations. Anyone else have any examples that they'd like to share of blending and braiding, or any resources that you'd like to share with your colleagues that have been particularly helpful in this space of financial sustainability?
I have, I don't know if this is exactly a resource, but having worked on both the kind of nonprofit grant making side and then on the other side of trying to get money for nonprofits, one thing I would encourage folks to do is really be creative about cost accounting. So that there was a question in the chat about how do you kind of get the money to even build up your capacity to go and create these trainings and prepare for new business. And there are ways to kind of account for that as part of your overhead. Anyway, some creative cost accounting ways that some of that those costs can be bundled into the work that you eventually book. So it's almost like an internal blending and braiding thing, but with blending and braiding within your own organization. So, and if anybody else has good examples of how they've done that, maybe they can chime in. But I've seen people sometimes be shy about that. Like it's not part of the actual delivery of the services, but it is, because it's part of what made you capable of being able to deliver those services. And that's a cost of developing the curriculum or the work or the capacity to provide the services.
Love that. Thank you so much, Julie, for adding some layers of internal thought on the process. That's great.
It's very complex.
Do others have examples that they'd like to share, or reactions to either Julie or John's comments, or the financing workbook if you've been deep in exploration here?
I'd just like to say quickly that, Julie, that was rather interesting what you just said. And I've brought that up with some nonprofits before. But I'm sort of thinking of, again, New Mexico is moving toward trying to create a state closed loop referral system. And one of the questions, is this thing of, just like you said, I've worked with community-based organizations that do a great job of providing their services. But then when you get into a program in which they're required to do contract management, to do more with data and stuff like that, all of which they have to be able to do in order to provide the services and get their money, I'm thinking that as we move into that kind of system, we're going to have to be thinking about that a lot more. Just as you said, what are the sort of operational expenses that make it possible for us to do the services better, especially since they're going to be asked to do a whole lot more.
Love that. Thank you so much, Chris. And so exciting to hear that you guys are all moving into that space right now. That's very exciting. Anybody else want to share anything else? Any questions, reactions? Julie, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say in response to Chris.
I'll say something briefly, just if there's no one else who wants the airtime. So Chris, my organization spends a lot of time looking at the way that different states are managing things, and everybody has their own recipes. They all have their pros and cons. But one of the things that's happening in California, someone mentioned earlier, the CalAIM program, is that the state actually made technical assistance money available for community-based organizations to kind of shore up their skills for the new environment to meet the new challenges. The ones that you've mentioned are perfect examples. So public funds are potentially something that, organizations could get together and lobby for, private philanthropic funds with the same goal. I think the last thing, and this is harder for organizations that are smaller, but organizations that do have some financial reserves can kind of fund it in the upfront phase. And then what I was suggesting is, from an accounting standpoint, build it into your cost later. That's not for everyone. Not everyone has enough reserves that they can sort of front the cost to develop the business, if you will, before they get it. That's not available to everyone, but those are just a couple of thoughts on that. But it's a very, very real gap, and it's a chicken and egg problem.
Mhm,
No, thanks. That's interesting.
mhm.
That is so helpful, Julie. And I am excited to hear John too, echoing also that they're learning not to be shy about asking for grant support to build capacity. And I think that's such a huge concept that is often underlooked. I mean, there's a lot of capacity that needs to be built. And so, when I worked in a multi-sector collaborative on the ground, we funded an initiative related to asthma, and we were out there, we got some applications, some applicants, and it felt like none of the applicants actually were getting the right information out, and they just lacked the capacity to really do the project. And so we circled back as the grant funding entity and the funder and said, maybe we need to fund these organizations to really build that capacity. And so I just want to encourage you all to be bold in that ask and to express those needs, because often without that, you're not going to have that opportunity. And so we were able to circle back and to do things differently. We wrote that grant differently, so people actually got capacity building dollars to put in the proper infrastructure, the understanding in their organizations, especially the nonprofit setting, to really be able to do this work more effectively. And we felt that was a much more sustainable approach, because these organizations were the most important ones to be engaging in the community and have the long-lasting impact. So I know we're at time. It's 30 minutes, which always flies by. We are going to just launch a poll on our end to see how today went for you. We have been toggling back and forth between 30 and 45-minute sessions. So if you wouldn't mind just spending a second here before you jump out to answer 3 very quick questions for us to try to improve our processes here. We just want to know how today went for you. And if you can go to the next slide, Catherine. Next slide. We just want to put out a reminder for you all that we will have one more Fill Up Your Cup session in 2023. That's going to be on December 20th. And if you have enjoyed Julie speaking up here in this meeting, we are super excited to share that Julie will be back talking a little bit more about leveraging the for-profit partnerships to improve public health. So we're really excited that Julie has come into space with Fill Up Your Cup. She was one of the registrants, and every time we get somebody that we think has a topic that may be of interest or a question that they want to discuss, we say, hey, why don't you come and host a conversation? So Julie is here to play with us and enjoy some space with you in December. So thank you all very much for joining today. We appreciate your feedback. We will be on, not officially, but as a water cooler afterward, if anyone wants to stick around and just chat briefly.